Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make a chocolate heart cake, and this is what it looks like. Isn't it beautiful? It starts with a chocolate chiffon cake, which we're going to layer with a chocolate whipped cream, and when we cover the whole cake with chocolate ganache, and then I've also decorated the top with some chocolate truffles. Perfect dessert for Valentine's Day. So the first thing you need to do is preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 180 degrees Celsius. And then you will need a 9-inch, which is 23 centimeter, heart-shaped pan. And this pan has about 2¼ inch size, which is about 5½ centimeters. And what I'm going to do is butter and flour the pan. So what I did is just melt a little bit of butter, and then I'm using a pastry brush to brush. You could also just use one of those non-stick sprays that have flour added to them. You could use that as well. Now, if you don't have a heart-shaped pan, you don't want to buy one, you could use a regular 9-inch pan. That is an option. And then I'm just going to put a little bit of flour in there, and then just kind of swirl it around, tilt your pan until you get everything coated with some flour. I normally do this over the sink. It's a little messy. So there you have it, and then just tap. And there you have your pan. So now we're going to start with our chocolate chiffon cake. And a chiffon cake is actually a cross between a butter and a sponge cake. So you kind of get the best of both. So the first thing I want to do is, in a measuring cup, I have a ½ cup, 120 milliliters of oil, a flavorless oil. I mean, you could use safflower, corn, canola, vegetable oil, whatever you have in the house. And then to that, I'm going to add 1/3 cup, 80 milliliters. Now you could either use coffee, or, which I'm going to do here, and have your coffee at room temperature, or you could just use water, either one. And then I'm going to also add 1½ teaspoons, which is 5 grams of pure vanilla extract. And I'm just going to whisk that together. And the great thing about oil is it makes a really nice, soft, and moist cake. But what it also is really great is when you refrigerate the cake, it doesn't the texture doesn't become hard like when you use butter. And then in a separate bowl, I have 2/3 cup, 85 grams of all-purpose flour, or you may know that as plain flour. And to that, because we are making a chocolate chiffon cake, we are going to add some unsweetened cocoa powder. So you will need 1/3 cup. That's 35 grams of unsweetened. I prefer the flavor in this cake of Dutch processed cocoa powder, but if you don't have that, you could just use a regular unsweetened. And I am going to sift that because, you know, cocoa powder just tends to have some lumps. So just to make sure we get rid of those. And then I'm going to add 1¼ teaspoons of baking powder. That is about, 5 grams of baking powder. And then 1/2 teaspoon, 3 grams of baking soda, and 1/4 teaspoon, about 1 gram of salt. Now you can either sift all these ingredients together, or I'm just going to use a wire whisk. You want to make sure that everything's mixed together. Okay, and then in a large bowl, you could, if you have a stand mixer, you could use mix this part in your stand mixer with the paddle attachment, or you could use a hand mixer as well. But I'm just going to do this by hand. Now, I should have said this before, but about a ½ hour before you start your batter, you want to separate your eggs because you want your eggs to be at room temperature. So you will need to separate 3 large eggs. And you do it when they're cold. It's much easier. That way the yolks don't tend to break. So you put your 3 yolks in one bowl and your whites in another, and you will, to your whites, add 1 extra large egg white. So if you want to go by weight, you will need 50 grams of egg yolks, and you will need 120 grams of egg whites. And then just make sure, like I said, they're at room temperature. Everything mixes together better when it's at room temperature. So what I'm going to do is just take a wire whisk and just break up my yolks. I mean, this is kind of easy. That's why I'm just going to do it by hand. But if you want to pull out your mixer or use your hand mixer, by all means. And then to that, I'm going to add 2/3 of a cup. That's 135 grams of granulated white sugar. And we're just going to mix all that together. And then what I'm going to do is slowly add my liquid in here. I'm just going to add a little, kind of break that up. So, and then just add a little more. Let's keep whisking. As you can see, this is not a difficult batter to make. That's what's so great about a chiffon cake. And now I'm going to add some of my dry ingredients. And then whisk all that together. Oop. Try not to do that. Get it all over the counter and me. Okay. Oh, doesn't that look gorgeous? So now, as you can see, this is quite thick. So what we're going to do now is we're going to beat our egg whites separately until they get stiff peaks. And then we're going to fold that into this batter, which will really lighten it. And that's what's going to give us that really nice light texture to our cake. So I am using my stand mixer and use your whisk attachment. You could use a hand mixer, or really you could just use a bowl with a wire whisk. So you put your whites that are room temperature, and then I'm going to add 1/4 teaspoon, 1 gram of cream of tartar, and that helps to stabilize the whites, and so when you beat them, they don't tend to dry out when you put the cream of tartar. You could add like just an equal amount of lemon juice. That would do the same thing. So what I'm going to do is beat this just until we almost get to soft peaks. Okay, so this is about what you're looking for. These start to get a little soft peaks. So now what we're going to do is gradually add 1/3 of a cup, which is 65 grams of granulated white sugar, and then we're going to continue to beat on high speed until we get stiff peaks. I'm just going to add a little bit of sugar. There we go. Oh, so there's our whites. That's what you're looking for. So now what we're going to do is we're going to not add all the whites into the batter at one time. We're going to add like just a little, maybe 1/3, and this will lighten. Because it's hard to, when you've got a really thick mixture and a light mixture, you want to add a little to kind of lighten it. So what you want to do is just make sure big strokes. Turn it over. Make sure you get to the bottom of your bowl. That's why it's good to have a fairly large bowl to do this. Okay, looks pretty good. Like I said, make sure you scrape down to the bottom of your bowl. There's a tendency not to, and then that part will be quite thick when you pour it into your cake pan, and then you'll get these pockets of dense cake, which we don't want. So that's why it's important to really mix the whites thoroughly into the batter. But at the same time, you got to be careful not to deflate the whites. So it's kind of a little bit of a technique here. Okay. Almost there. Sure, you get that bottom. One more round. And that looks good. Okay, so now just pour it to our pan. Okay, and then I just like to run it through in case there's any air bubbles. We want to get rid of those. So now, as always, everybody's oven's a little different, but I find for this cake around 35 to 40 minutes, what you're looking for, it will rise. It will be, if you press it, it will be it'll spring back. And of course, a toothpick inserted into the center will come out clean. Okay, our chocolate chiffon cake is now done. See, it grows nicely, and you feel it's kind of spongy. Toothpick inserted into the center will come out clean. So now what we're going to do is let it cool maybe 15 minutes on a wire rack. If you do find chiffon cakes have a tendency to deflate as they cool, if you find it's going down a lot, then what you can do is just flip your cake pan over. So the other upside down, and then just double stack your racks. And so when we come back, I will show you how to take it out of the pan. Okay, so now we're ready to take our cake out of the pan. As you can see, I did flip mine over because it was deflating. So what you want to do now is take a spatula or knife and just run it around the sides of your cake. Make sure it's not sticking. And then we'll just flip it, so hopefully it'll come out. Okay, there we go. So now what I'm going to do, it's still quite hot. I'm going to let this cool completely, and when we come back, we will make our chocolate whipped cream. So now our cake has cooled completely, so I put it on, you could either a plate or a platter, and then using a sharp knife, I like one of these ones that are really long. Just what we're going to do is just cut the cake in half. And if you notice, this is the bottom of the cake. So when you put your cake on the platter, have the top of the cake on the bottom. And I'm just going to take that off. And so there we go. So now what we're going to do is fill our cake with chocolate whipped cream. So good. So in your mixing bowl, now you can, if you have a stand mixer, you can use your whisk attachment, or you could just use a hand mixer, or really you can just whip your cream in a bowl with a wire whisk. So you will need a half a cup of cold whipping cream or heavy whipping cream, and that's cream with a 35 to 40% butterfat content. And what that means is when you whip it, it will reach stiff peaks. So just put that in your bowl. And then, of course, we're making chocolate whipped cream. So what I'm doing is going to add is 1 tablespoon, which is 7 grams of unsweetened cocoa powder. Now you can use either the regular unsweetened or the Dutch processed here, whatever you have and whatever you like. And then a little flavoring. I'm using 1/4 teaspoon, 1 gram of pure vanilla extract. And of course, because we're using unsweetened cocoa powder, we need to sweeten that. So 2 tablespoons, 25 grams of granulated white sugar. And then I'm just going to whisk all that together. Make sure. And then what I'm going to do is just whip that until we get stiff peaks. Okay. That looks good. So there we have nice thick whipping cream. Now, if you ever found that you over whipped your cream, then what I always do is just add a little more of your heavy whipping cream and then whip it a little more, and then it won't be, because sometimes you keep whipping, it will turn into butter. So now what you want to do is just put your cream on top of your cake layer there. And then with the back of a spoon, or I'm just using an offset spatula, just spread your cream. Now don't go right to the edge, leave a little bit of a border, because once we put the other cake layer on top, it will kind of squish that cream. We don't want it coming out the ends. Okay, that looks about, try to get an even layer so that top of our cake will be even. Okay, looks good. And then what we're going to do is just take our cake. Now if you did find the cream kind of came out the sides, then just wipe it off, which I actually have here. So I'm just going to take my finger and just wipe that off. That looks good. So what I'm going to do now is just cover it, and I'm just going to chill it for a bit. Now you could do to this point and let it chill even overnight before you cover it with the ganache, but I would let it chill at least an hour or two just to firm it up a bit, and when we come back we will make our chocolate ganache. So now for our chocolate ganache. In a heat-proof bowl, I have 8 ounces, which is 230 grams of, now you can use either a semi-sweet or a bittersweet chocolate, and you want to finely chop that. And try to use a chocolate that you would enjoy eating just on its own. And then we will, in a small saucepan, I'm going to put 3/4 of a cup, which is 180 milliliters of heavy cream or heavy whipping cream. And then I'm also going to add 2 tablespoons, 25 grams of butter, and then just cut it into small pieces so it melts faster. That's going to add some richness to our ganache. And then I'm just going to heat this like almost to a boil. You'll start to see the bubbles around the edges, so maybe on medium heat. Watch carefully, because once that, if it comes up to a boil, then it really starts foaming up, so you want to catch it before it does that. Okay, so we're almost there. You can start to see the bubbles around the outer edge. So there we go. Take that off of the heat and pour it over our chocolate. Now the reason you want your chocolate finely chopped is so it will melt really easily with the hot cream. And then if you like, you don't have to, but I like it. I'm going to add 1 tablespoon. Now I'm using Grand Marnier. You could use, rum, brandy, whatever you like, or just leave it out. I think it adds a nice flavor. So what I'm going to do is just keep stirring this until, just gently, so we don't want to get a lot of air into our ganache. So just gently stir it until the chocolate is all melted. And then what I'm going to do is just let it, because it's a little hot. So I'm going to, once the chocolate is all melted, I'm going to let it just sit on the counter for about 10 minutes so it cools down, and also it like thickens a little. And then when we come back, we are going to assemble our chocolate heart cake. Okay, so our ganache has cooled down and thickened up just a little. And so what you want to do is take your cake and put it on a wire rack. And then what I like to do is just go over my cake, the top and the sides. And then if there's any crumbs, you can just kind of brush those off. And then just take your rack, have a baking sheet, and put it like so. Because we're going to pour the ganache over the top, and that way we don't want to waste any of that ganache. So it'll go into our baking pan. So then, what you want to do is just pour your ganache on top of the cake. And then what we're going to do is just let it run over the sides. It's best not to, touch the ganache too much, because we want it to keep that really nice, shiny, smooth. So just kind of, that's why we made like a little extra, maybe a little more than what we actually need, because we want to, so you want to make sure you get all those sides. See what I'm doing here. And what you can do, just to make, I've just got to look around here. Looks pretty good, but you can just gently And then if you have any spots, like if you go around and make sure, then you've got a lot of ganache on the bottom, and then you could just go around and fix that. Any spots. And I think that looks pretty good. Don't have my glasses on, but it looks pretty good. So now what I like to do, and we're not going to waste that ganache, so don't worry. So I like to take a spatula and move my cake a little so that it doesn't stick as it dries, because I'm going to leave it on this wire rack for a little bit just so that ganache can firm up. So just kind of move it just a little, and like so. And then, so I would let it sit on there, maybe 10-15 minutes before you try to transfer it over to your platter. And then what I like to do is put it back into the fridge, so that will harden that ganache. And you can just lift it off with a large spatula, carefully. And then, as you see, there is some ganache left over. So what we're going to do is, what you need to do is, you might need to strain that if there's any of the cake crumbs in there. Strain it, put it in a bowl, cover it, and put it into the fridge, and then just chill until it's really firm. And so when we come back, I'm going to do that, and we'll make some little truffles to put on the top of our cake. So now the ganache has got really nice and cold and firm. So what I do is just take a little spoon, and you can make your truffles as big or small as you want. And if this is kind of messy, so you could always wear some rubber gloves or something if you want. And then just roll them into whatever size you'd like. And then I like to roll them in some unsweetened cocoa powder, like so. And I've already done quite a few. So then what you do is, I don't know whether mine's still a little tacky, so you might, at home, you might want to wait until that's really firmed up. But then you just place your truffles all the way around your cake, like so. And then put it back in the fridge. And then I like, once I assemble my dessert, the heart cake, I like it to chill so everything can kind of firm up, and for at least a few hours, or You know, a lot of times I make it the day before, and then that way it's, you know, it's really nice and chilled. So what I'm going to do, I'll have lots of heart cake. Now I have this one, which I made yesterday, so I will cut into this. The neighbors are going to be getting some cake today. So, always thing is, how do you cut a heart cake? So I'm just going to cut off right across the bottom, I guess. Use a sharp knife. I kind of let this come to room temperature. It's a little easier to cut. And there we have it. Oh, gorgeous. You could serve this with some like raspberry or strawberry sauce if you like, or some fresh berries would be nice. Today we're just going to have it as is. You know, it's a really great combination because you got that soft and spongy chiffon cake. And using oil instead of butter gives you a really nice soft and moist texture. And then, of course, the chocolate whipping cream. And then the chocolate ganache. If you're a chocolate lover, you will love this dessert. And what's great is you can make it the day before. It actually will last several days in the refrigerator. So try it. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.